Ever wonder where the big questions actually came from? I don't just mean, what are stars made of, but how did we even start asking questions like that in the first place? Well, today, we're going all the way back to the beginning to meet the very first thinkers who kicked off a conversation that's been going for 2,500 years, and believe me, it still shapes our world today.
All right, let's start with a little puzzle. Whether you say falsafa in Arabic, philosophy in English, or philosophy in French, they all sound pretty much the same, right? Well, that is absolutely not a coincidence. All of these words point back to a single explosive moment in human history.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with where that word came from, then we'll witness this incredible leap in human thinking, explore two totally rival ideas about what reality even is, see how they were brilliantly put together, and finally trace this great debate all the way to our world today.
Okay, so why that shared word? Well, the short answer is it all comes down to the absolutely massive influence of one civilization, the ancient Greeks. They didn't just invent a new subject, they gave the entire world a new way to think.
The word itself comes from the Greek philosophia, which literally translates to the love of wisdom. And because basically the rest of the world learned this new way of thinking from the Greeks, we all just kind of adopted their word for it. It just goes to show you how completely revolutionary their ideas were.
So what was this incredible idea? Well, it all started with a radical shift, trying to understand the world without just saying, "Oh, the gods did it." This was a huge departure from thousands and thousands of years of myths and stories.
Our story really gets going right here, around 600 BCE, in a busy Greek port city called Miletus. There was this thinker named Thales, and he looked around at the world, and instead of asking which god was in charge of things, he asked a much simpler but way more powerful question. What is all this stuff actually made of?
And his famous answer was water. He decided everything is ultimately made of water. Now look, we know today that's not right. But here's the thing. His answer wasn't the important part, not even close. What mattered, what changed absolutely everything, was the way he tried to find the answer.
This was the real game changer. See, by suggesting a natural explanation, Thales took the gods out of the picture. Think about it. If you disagree with a myth, you're a heretic. But if you disagree with Thales' theory about water, you can debate him. You can argue with him. You can come up with a better theory. He basically took the handcuffs off of human thought.
And this new freedom immediately sparked this huge debate that really defined all of early philosophy. Two main camps popped up. First, you had the materialists. They followed Thales' lead, believing reality was made of some kind of physical stuff. Then you had the idealists, who argued that, no, true reality isn't physical at all. It's made of something more abstract, like ideas or numbers.
The materialists just took this idea and ran with it, like a relay race. Thales starts it off, right? But then his own student, Anaximander, grabs the baton and says, whoa, hold on. Water is a specific thing. The source of everything must be something more basic, something infinite and undefined. He called it the upper Rhone. Then his student, Anaximenes, comes along and says, no, you're both wrong. It's air. Air can get thinner or thicker to become everything else. You can literally see the debate happening in real time.
But not everybody was on board with this. The other school of thought, the idealists, they looked at this messy, constantly changing physical world and thought, the real truth can't be here. It's got to be somewhere else, somewhere cleaner, more perfect, something that lasts forever.
And the star player for this team is a name you definitely know from math class, Pythagoras. For him, the ultimate reality wasn't water or air, it was math. He saw that a triangle's angles always add up to 180 degrees. That was a perfect, unchanging truth, way more real than any physical object. He believed the entire universe was governed by numbers.
But here's the thing about Pythagoras. He wasn't just a math whiz. He was also a bit of a mystic. He started this sort of religious commune, believed in reincarnation, and had some strange rules. For instance, and I am not making this up, his followers were forbidden from eating beans. Apparently, he thought the gas they produced could disturb the purity of the soul. A total genius for sure, but maybe a little weird.
Following in this idealist tradition was another guy, Heraclitus. He looked at the world and came to a fascinating conclusion. The only single, unchanging rule of the entire universe is change itself. Everything, absolutely everything, is constantly in flux.
His most famous saying captures this perfectly. When you step into a river a second time, it's not the same river. The water has moved on. And you know what? You're not the same person either.
For Heraclitus, this principle of change was more real than any single object that was changing. And then came Parmenides. And this guy took this line of thinking to its most radical, most shocking conclusion. He trusted pure, cold logic over everything else. He argued that our senses, the very things that show us a world full of change and motion, are completely lying to us. Logically, he claimed, change is impossible.
To prove this absolutely bizarre point, his student Zeno came up with a series of brilliant paradoxes, or brain teasers. Let's look at the most famous one. Imagine a student, let's call him Zaid, wants to walk to his school. Simple enough, right? But is it logically possible?
Okay, hang with me here, this is cool. To get to his school, Zaid first has to travel half the distance. Makes sense. But then he has to travel half of the remaining distance, and then half of that little bit that's left, and so on. You see where this is going? The distance can be divided in half an infinite number of times. So here's the kicker. How can anyone complete an infinite series of tasks? Logically, it seems impossible. And this led Parmenides and Zeno to their absolutely astounding conclusion. Our senses tell us Said gets to school, but pure logic says he can't. And if logic and reality are fighting, well, it must be reality that's wrong. Therefore, all motion, all change is just an illusion, a totally mind-bending idea. So the debate was basically deadlocked. You had the materialists saying everything is physical stuff, and the idealists saying, nope, all change is an illusion. How could you possibly solve this? Well, enter a brilliant thinker named Democritus, who came up with an idea that would echo for thousands of years. Democritus proposed that the universe is made of tiny, indivisible, and eternal particles that he called atoms, all moving around in an empty void. And this single idea elegantly solved both problems. To Heraclitus, he'd say, you're right, we see constant change, but that's just the rearrangement of atoms. And to Parmenides, he'd say, you're also right, the fundamental stuff of the world, the atoms themselves, is unchanging. Their movement just creates the appearance of change. It was an absolutely incredible intellectual achievement. And with that, the stage was set. This fundamental debate between a world of physical stuff versus a world of abstract ideas, of observation versus pure reason, it didn't end with the Greeks. It became the central driving conversation of all of Western thought.
The same conversation was picked up by Plato and Aristotle, who built their entire systems around it. It was debated like crazy in the Islamic Golden Age by thinkers like Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd. It fueled the scientific revolution with figures like Newton on one side and Descartes on the other. And it continues with giants like Darwin and Einstein, who are still probing the very nature of material reality itself.
Which brings us to a final, pretty wild thought. Modern physics, especially quantum mechanics, has revealed a reality that is just bizarre and paradoxical, one where the act of observing something seems to change what's being observed. It almost feels like the certainty of that solid material world is dissolving again. So could it be that this ancient debate, started 2,500 years ago in a Greek port city, is actually far from over?